I did not know there was a difference in these cables. One side is 5 pin DIN Midi. The other side is TRS, but there's more to it than that. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the specific wiring for the Midi setup. The thing that I had the issue with from a cabling perspective was using those TRS to 5-pin DIN Midi connectors. There's not a singular standard. There's actually two available. There's type A and a type B. And the only way that you're going to be able to tell is by reaching out to the manufacturer, looking at the manual or the specifications for the device that you're purchasing. Because otherwise, the only difference is the way that they're grounded on the inside of the DIN connector side. From a visual perspective, you will not be able to tell the difference. And if you ever encounter an issue with one of those connectors, don't just throw it away. More than likely, it's the wrong type of connector for the device that you're using it on. And you just need to figure out if it's an A or a B and then get the correct type of connector. Now, the blue box uses type B. The Bebo uses type B. The H9 uses a regular 5-pin DIN Midi port. The Iridium uses both 5-pin DIN and USB MIDI, and it uses USB MIDI standard, and that's a difference as well. What I found is like the DeepMind 12 does not use a standard. It's not compliant. If you connect it and try to run both MIDI and interface with the editor, I found that it didn't work. Anyway, so the things that I really had issues with, I was going to initially have the Force be the clock, and I had planned on connecting the Bebo and the blue box out via it to get clock source from. But I ended up scrapping that, and not because of the connector. I figured that out. That's the other thing, is that this side is a type A, that side is a type B, and you have to have a 5-pin DIN MIDI cable in between it. So that's another issue that you may run into. You may have two devices that you're trying to link together, and one is a type A and the other is type B, and you're using those the TSR to 5-pin connectors, and each end of the device is a different ground point. So just be mindful. Make sure that you have the appropriate connector types for your devices when you're trying to do this. So I wanted to stay with a USB powered hub, and the reason why is I wanted to have some expandability. Let's see, what else is different here? So the iRig Keys Pro is the actual audio interface for the iPad Pro. The iPad Pro has a USB Type-C connector, and it is directly plugged into the iRig's Key Pro via a hub. And I'll show you some B-roll of what that hub looks like. It's a dongle rather. Sorry, it's just a basic Type-C dongle, and it's not the Apple branded dongle. I've used this for a couple of years now with it, and it's been fairly stable throughout every update, generation up or a revision up, and I've not had any issues with it, so I think it's fairly safe to say that it's stable. And I realize that a lot of people are having problems with that. They'll try to get into the iPad music software stuff. And because it's changing so much because of the connectors that Apple keeps swapping out and removing things. Eventually, I'm thinking that we will no longer have any connectors at all on the iPad, and then we'll have to run everything via Bluetooth or via Wi-Fi. So you just got to kind of keep up with the technology. And then I guess at that point, I would probably be able to use the Force's Wi-Fi connection for it. It supports Wi-Fi Midi as well as network Midi directly on the machine. Also, I could probably get away with using the XM to possibly do that, even though it doesn't have a wireless module interfaced with it. I still would be able to create a RTP connection to it via the Mio. Finally, I finished the standalone setup. If you're new to the channel, you may want to go back, and I'll leave links in the show notes for those videos. I started trying to build a standalone setup 2 years ago, and I started with the Akai Force. At the time, I was looking for a device that, as it was advertised, would allow me to be able to export out ALS files, also allow me to build and construct my beats from the machine and transfer all that via ALS over to Ableton. And that was kind of my requirements that I was looking for. But when it was originally released, the Force was basically in beta mode, and it was missing many of the features that were promised in the initial release. So I ended up taking it back to the Guitar Center and kind of scrapping the project, because at that time I really didn't want to reach out and do like an MPC-X or some sort of, or the Live. I really wanted a more versatile machine like the Force to be able to do what I wanted to do with the setup. So after 2 years, here we are again, and I went ahead and repurchased the Force. And yes, I finally have all of the features that I was expecting, and am extremely happy. My experience with the device is way better now. A lot of documentation issues have been resolved, and my only complaint now is there's no longer forums to be able to reach out to others or to support when you have questions about something specific with the machine. So that is my only issue now with the Force. Other than that, it works as promised and as advertised. So I'm super, super duper happy with that. And I want to say, Akai, thank you. I appreciate you guys for actually doing what you said that you were going to do. Some companies would actually just dump the product if it just didn't work out when they released it. And you stuck in there, and you actually did the work that was required to get it to the state that you advertised it as. And I'm really happy about that. So it is the heart of my standalone setup. So the complexity of my setup came from my wanting to have access to all of the gear in my lab. I wanted to be able to utilize this side, the Iridium, the Hydra, the iPad, and the No Coast. I wanted to be able to use it over here on this side, which I considered the recording side. Have access to Ableton and stuff over here. And also wanted to be able to access the DeepMind, the Mother 32, the Pittsburgh Modular 3900, and for sure the Complete Control S88. Sometimes while I have access to this little keyboard, it's really difficult and uncomfortable and hard for me to like really do piano bass tricks and stuff with it. The keys, for one, I'm not used to that synth action. I'm used to having more of a weighted kind of key bed. Unfortunately, in my research in trying to find a keyboard that was going to work with my setup, there's just nothing available that will do what I want. This is the closest that I could get to what I really needed. The iRig Keys 2 allows you to be able to use it as an audio interface with your iPad. And that was the reason why I got it. The key bed on this thing, it's that synth action. If you're used to synth action, you'll have no problems with it. But if you're used to the weighted keys, this is not, it's not a walk in the park. It's taken me some time to really get used to playing. I consider it is much faster action, but it's just different and I find it rather uncomfortable at times because it doesn't react the way that I'm used to from a key perspective. Now, the iRig Keys 2 is a fantastic device from a technical perspective. Again, it has like a built-in audio interface on the back, which I use to connect to the blue box. Now, the blue box is kind of the heart of the system on this side from an audio perspective. It allows me to be able to run the Hydra, the Iridium, the iPad, and the No Coast directly into the back. There's 6 ports that are split in pairs, so you have access to stereo pairs or mono. The only thing that's mono over here is this No Coast. Everything else is stereo. So I kind of almost wish that I had double ports on this thing, so that I could expand it without having to physically buy another unit, which is what I would end up having to do unless I found another line mixer that would give me the amount of connections that I would like. But I think I'm done on this side. There's just no room. There's no room for anything else over here. So I'm not going to even try. Plus, I don't have any more audio inputs on my my Apollo 8 either. So I'm done. I'm done for sure now. So one of the other issues that I ran into when addressing this whole standalone setup is the Midi. Now, the Midi, I was able to resolve it by actually using a secondary Mio unit. Now, I recently had purchased the Mio for my recording setup because I needed to add additional inputs for the other gear that I had sitting on my desk. So I needed actual physical DIN ports because a lot of this old gear still uses the 5-pin DIN Midi. And the Mio allowed me to be able to combine both the 5-pin DIN Midi plus USB Midi on the back of it. And I'll have to show you what the software side of this looks like and how I have it set up. But this was a fantastic way for me to combine both sides of the house. And I'll show you the diagram for how everything is hooked up for that. About the Mio setups. So the one on the left is physically connected to my Mac. The one on the right is connected to the Force. The one on the left has primarily most of the gear that's on the opposite end of the room. These are the items that are plugged into physical DIN ports. The Virus, the Mother 32, the Pittsburgh Microvolt 3900, the DeepMind 12. We're going to revisit this one in a second. Now, let me show you what those connections look like when you're selecting them inside of the Auricle software. So, because I want to be able to share these connections over the network, I had to tell it that I wanted to create a RTP network session for it as well. So This one is pointed to both the DAW and to an RTP port. The Auricle software allows you to be able to name these ports. So initially when you set these up, they have like generic names, but all you do is just use the pencil and change that port name to the device, and it'll make it a lot clearer and easier to be able to identify the device. So here's a blowout of what the DAW ports look like. Same port, let's just use this as an example. The virus here in this section only shows where the physical connection for it is. So you kind of want to keep these sections kind of clear and not try to overload them with multiple connections, because it can get kind of weird. I had to learn that the hard way. And so again, if it's a DIN port, I'm going to tell it I want it to be connected to my DAW. And then since I'm going to be using it across the way, I'm sending it out an RTP connection. And in the DAW, I'm telling it where I'm getting the Midi from. It's coming from the DIN. All right, so now let's kind of skip down to the RTP section. So for the excess virus, the only thing that I'm telling it here is that I'm getting my information from a DIN connection, which is physically connected to it. Now let's talk about those remote connections that are coming from across the room. Okay, so we're going to use the ASM Hydrosynth as an example. So because that is, it's coming from across the room, I'm first going to go into my RTP network Midi section, and I'm going to make an initiator for it. So that's the difference between these connection types. If it's physically connected to the device, physically connected to the Mio meaning, then it's a responder. So each one of those lines where I told it that I wanted to set up an RTP session for it within that very first section, those are responders. Now, things that are coming from a network location, I have to initiate those. So I've named it the ASM Hydrosynth. On the other side, I'm going to show you what it looks like here in a second. But I want to kind of keep this kind of clear so that it doesn't get too confusing. The other connection that's coming from across the room is the Iridium, and you see those connections here. Let's go back out of here and go back to the routing again. Okay, so down here in the routing, because it's coming from an RTP source, I'm telling the Mio that I want to send it to my DAW. And if you come up here to the DAW section, the DAW section says, hey, it's getting it from RTP network Midi. So that's how the sections need to look. It makes more sense when you really think about it. All these sections kind of coalesce with each other, but it's very simple to keep things clear once you start getting in here and setting it up. If you guys have any questions about setting up Auricle and getting these connections right, please don't hesitate to leave comments in the comment section. Now, I found that iConnectivity created a series of videos showing how to use this, but they while the videos are very thorough and they really show you how to connect things, I really wish they would have named some of the devices instead of using the sketchy default names in the setup, because it makes it a lot more clear when you're able to see, hey, this is my piece of gear that I'm connecting from one source to another. So now you get a chance in real time to see what those connections really look like, because in the real world, we name our stuff what the gear is. If it's a guitar that has a MIDI port on it, I need to know that it's that guitar with the MIDI port. I don't need it to be M423856. That's crazy. Oh boy. So that's the mix station side. Now, if we go over to the standalone station side, we're going to go to the MIDI routing on that side. It's going to look a lot different. The physical things that are connected there are the the iRig Keys Pro 2, which is on DIN 1. The PolyVivo, which is only connected for getting clock source. That's all that I'm using that for. I'm not using it to send MIDI back and forth. It's only getting out MIDI out. And I want to talk about this software too. So when you actually have two Mio devices connected to an Ethernet source, like a switch, it will be able to see both of those devices on your computer. So that's how I'm able to do this. You don't have to have both of your Mios connected to the same computer to see both Mio devices, because this is one way on the other side of the room, and the only thing that's connected to it is an Ethernet cable that's physically connected to a switch. And it's showing up here because it can see that traffic from the Mio device over the network. So you don't have to really worry about how you're going to be able to manage this one. You manage it from here. Or if you don't like managing it from here, you can physically connect the USB side of it to a computer, and then you can install Auricle on another machine and do it from there. So if in the event that you actually do have a computer on the other side, you can actually set up Auricle on that side and have access to Auricle on that side as well. So I mean, there's a lot of serious flexibility with this iConnectivity MioXM, and they also have a larger unit that's an XL unit. Very impressive technology, very, very, very useful. The other thing that you probably want to know about with this, and let's just kind of go back to this one. So again, this is the one that's on the opposite side of the room. I have my Iridium and the Hydrosynth connected via a USB host, and looks like I'm having a little bit of connectivity issues right here, right now. All of a sudden, when I'm trying to show you something, it keeps connecting and disconnecting. So let me go back into the routing. Hopefully it'll stop doing that and stay stable long enough so I can show you. Okay, so when you set it up on this side, again, it's set up the same way as the other side. You're telling it that the DAW needs to see it, the network needs to see it from the USB hosted section, and down in the network section, I'm telling it that I'm getting my information from a USB hosted instrument. So those are the only two things that I had to do on that side to be able to get that working. Now, to bring over all of the other gear, I've set up a connection on two sides or 2 points. First, I've set up an RTP connection. So in the RTP section, I told it that I want to send it to the DAW. But first, what I did was I had to set up a RTP network MIDI initiator for it. So again, this is the other side of the house. The Mother 32 has an initiator. See, the Pittsburgh is there, the complete S88. Everything that's on the opposite side of the room is an initiator. Whereas the things that are physically connected to that Mio are responders. And there we go again. So I'm gonna have to figure out why I'm getting a drop packets on this side. I think it has something to do with my computer. Okay, the other thing that may be interesting is the USB host reservations. And I had to end up using this. Let me show you what I had to use it for. So the DeepMind. The DeepMind, because it has a non-standard USB MIDI, I had to reserve the USB slot on this side. So the things that have USB reservations are the complete S88, Prophet 12, and the DeepMind editor. Mind you, this is the editor only. So I assigned it port 1 for the DeepMind editor. And that is being utilized only for the editor software. And let me just show you that real quick. That may make more sense if you see how it's physically connected. So under settings, I have it specifically pointed to that one new connection that I created for it called the editor. And I'm not seeing it. Why am I not seeing it right now? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it's not showing up. That's not good. Okay, and it keeps crashing. That's not a good sign. So let's go back.
2 hours later.
To show you how to fix this. Okay, so the Mio. Let's look at the Mac OS Midi Studio. So to access it, you just go to Audio Midi Setup. And if it doesn't automatically open up with your audio devices listed, go up to the window pull down menu and then select show MIDI Studio, and then you'll get this MIDI Studio set up. Okay, so anytime that you make a change inside of the Auricle software, for some, I don't know if this is a glitch or a bug, but it seems like it is a bug, and it may not be something that's fixable from iConnectivity's perspective. It may be an Apple thing. When you make a change on this side to a name of the port, that name seems like it should automatically refresh over here in the Mac OS driver for that device, but it doesn't. So what you'll have to do is disconnect the Mio, come to this screen, delete the device, plug the Mio back in, and then do a network scan or a MIDI scan. What it does is it'll bring back any devices that were previously unplugged or are removed out of the setup, and it'll bring it back. But since I've already done it, it's going to be non-responsive for a second here. And then it'll bring it back. It doesn't hurt anything from a driver perspective when you do that, other than just changing the port names. And then if you change the device name itself, meaning this overall outside name of the device, make sure that you rename it that, so that when you open it up in your DAW, that you don't have to go back into like Ableton or Studio One or whatever DAW that you're using and reset this all up again. It'll still have the same naming convention for all of the connections that you've created inside of your DAW. That would be my only recommendation. So the reason why it wasn't showing up is because I had, when I set this its secondary editor port up, I changed the name, the label name on it, and I forgot to do that naming switch. So when I come in here under the editor's connections, the in and outs need to match. So see how it says Mix Station DeepMind Editor? Again, I had to separate these connections to be able to get this to work for that particular device. And so now, see how it's showing all of the information for the device. Now it can communicate with the device without me actually having to physically touch the device. I can do it from here. I can also make go to the preset manager and change the preset that's currently in there. I can save presets as well. And so I really like this editor. It's really convenient for sound design, from a sound design perspective, if you're creating your own patches and stuff. Also being able to access some of the stock stuff is kind of cool too. Adding new banks and that kind of thing. It's really, really nice tool to be able to have in your toolbox. So let's talk about the TI Access Virus for a second, because that's like my favorite synth. It really is, outside of the No Coast. I just haven't been able to use it very much lately because I've been fighting with that control center software. But after I started messing around with this Mio stuff, I actually resolved a lot of the issues that I was having with it previously. So I ended up going completely away from using the USB Midi, and now I'm using just a singular 5-pin DIN cable plugged directly into the Mio. And that's giving me the opportunity to be able to use just the Mystery Islands plugin. Okay, that DeepMind plugin, that DeepMind software is really weird. It's acting weird. I have to see if there's a new version available. Okay, so also what I did is, to keep my setup clean, is I created a folder called External Gear. If you've dealt with external gear before inside of Ableton, you know that you have to have a MIDI input, or you have to have MIDI source, and then you have to have an audio for that source. So what I did was I grouped these two together, and I named it whatever the device is. And then from there, you just drag that group over into the folder that you want to create, and boom, forever you've got both this MIDI and audio already set up and activated and ready to go. That way you're not having to remember to how to build it every time that you want to use it, because it can be a pain in the butt. So with this one, again, it has an editor, and this is the editor. This is made by a company called Mystery Island Music. It is 100% compatible with the Access TI2 series, which is why I was interested in getting it. I've actually had this for a while and just was not able to get it to work, and I didn't have all of the right things in place to even start experimenting with it. So you come in here, I'm going to tell it that I want it to be in and out for the virus there. And wow, that really kicks up the CPU for a second. So I'm able to actually go to the patch library, and well, once it finishes connecting here, I've noticed this is really slow. I may end up having to connect the output cable as well, so they can do the back and forth between this and the software. I think with it only using the input cable to the virus on this one side, that may be the reason why I'm having such a delay with it, because it really needs the output port to be available as well, since it's only able to carry the inputs information like one way at a time. So I may end up doing that as well, adding an additional 5-pin DIN MIDI port cable to the virus so that I can speed up this process. But this, it gives me access to all my sound banks that are that I've been able to acquire. I can change programs over on the virus from here. The virus actually has to be in multi-mode for this to work. So if you're like standing right in front of it, the only thing that you'll see on the screen on the virus is it'll say that it's in multi-mode, init 5 or whatever. But from a sound perspective, all the sounds will change. So that's working really well. I really appreciate that now. Whereas before, I was having to deal with that the Access Virus Control Center, which is no longer supported, and it was having a lot of data flow problems using the USB MIDI, which is kind of weird. It was not having that problem before. I upgraded to Catalina, and then after I updated to Catalina, yeah, it just really stopped functioning the way that it should. So this thing gives me all the same functionality that I had previously in the control center software. So that will get me back to using this thing a lot more. And I'm pretty happy about that. Now, being able to use it over at the standalone station, I'm going to have to drag my computer over so I can share my screen so that I can at least just see this. I just need to be able to get into the editor. I don't really need Ableton for that. But because this is a VST, I have to have Ableton open just for that. So I'm going to have it set up to do like a screen share with this Mac, like on one of my laptops, and have it set up where I can just use this editor to change sounds. I could also probably do like use the send the CC messages for the program name, but there's so many patches in there that I have no idea what the names of the things are that I'm wanting to access. So I really need the editor to be able to see the name of the program that I'm trying to access, or the patch I'm trying to access. It'll make my life a lot simpler. The only thing there is that I'll have to figure out a way to set up like a small little table or something, maybe like a little TV tray or something that will allow me to just sit my laptop there so that I can have access to this editor. And since it's already connected via Wi-Fi, I don't have to worry about dragging cables over to it and all that stuff. So that's the other way that I've resolved that issue. And being able to use my virus again, which is, I'm real happy about that. So let's talk about the final problem, which is audio.